All right, we're talking good times here. Yeah. Brr, dur, dur, dur. It's good times. Whoa, hey, hey, how's it going? Oh, hey, welcome. So, uh, I will tell you this: I spend a lot of time preparing for this show, but the research, the study, all that fun stuff. But it's the bow tie. The bow tie literally is the most difficult part of the process. It's like I have to make another 15 minutes to get ready. It's crazy. I just sent Moto Racer saying, hey, check out the new show if you want. It's on right now. He says, no, I'll simply stick to the happy zone. Thanks for the offer. It is a happy zone. You're so prejudging. It is not good. So, but let's get to the topic at hand. Sad when somebody's that prejudiced. Oh, wait, no, those aren't the note cards for tonight's show. DNA, RNA, NRA, say, pay, pray. Just a little silly, not so clever pun. What we're looking at today is not really the NRA at all, really. Although, since it was easy to put in there, I mean, we'll touch on maybe the adaptation of weaponization of our resources to create a survivalistic of the fittest type scenario, a kind of self-made thing, kind of like when somebody makes a bunch of traps, or I mean, it could be anything. It could be a wall. It could be anything that divides and then creates this something nature didn't make. So, or even the misuse of something of that nature can create that kind of social stigma. But what we're talking about today, we're going to talk about the DNA and how that, in kind of like evolution, and how evolution and the DNA, how of course they make us what we are. Um, I told them I'm just talking about DNA. So you can still watch to support me, or just log in and go do something else. Does he not know how Twitch works? So, like, everybody's just watching. Well, my beautiful wife does provide content that is that awesome. So, DNA, all the different parts of the DNA strands, as we know, are the evolutionary roadmap of the human genos, of all animals and creatures and trees and plants and butterflies, and everything has this. Every living, moving, choice-making creature, from the microbes, micro-sized creature like water bears, up to elephants and massive 100-mile long fungus. They all have these DNA that basically take the amino acids to create the proteins that are the building blocks of everything that we are, they are. So it's the how-to of the creation of the different things. Now, when we talk about DNA and human behavior, we talk about inheritable traits that are having to do with behavior. And those things that one can like associate or correlate to the DNA and these different pairs. Now there's several, or what we're looking at today. I shouldn't speak in absolutes when it comes to science. I barely am scratching the surface on understanding this, but the overall ideas that it works in a progressive kind of linear pattern where DNA and evolution of that DNA happens in a slow progressive nature over time with natural selection. Now, natural selection, of course, is not what we found is not necessarily survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest leads, when a group does that, when it's sheer mass and size and power and speed and things like that, you're only looking at a 5% ratio of the creatures that get to procreate, and they are also the most likely to die, and therefore others in the group who are more cooperative and less combative actually can make a long-term difference in the survival. So it's been proven over and over by different fields of study that this idea that survival of the fittest is even Darwinian. It's not. He never wrote that. He wrote about cooperation and love and empathy and things like that for the survival of most species, because it is how most species survives or has survived. Creatures that don't use cooperation and a certain type of cooperative culture are just use simple like attrition, like a spider. They just, 1,000 babies, so 10 will live. Now, the other idea that we're going to look at, that we're going to put in here, because it is, and I don't believe that either one is true. I don't believe that evolution is a straight line that kind of goes upward up to like from, microbe to human, and monkeys in between and all that. I don't think it's a straight line upwards or a slow incline, but rather a stepped, if you think of it like steps. So there's a long period of not a lot of change, not a lot of consequential change. Okay, because when you're talking about DNA and how that changes over time and evolution and behavior there within, you're looking at little tiny changes that happen to the DNA. And sometimes these are because of environmental persistence, like it's very wet all the time. And so that just begins to affect the people and the persons and the generations over time as they all experience the same kind of environment. And therefore, like when generations of people stay in a higher climate, they're going to get a wider chest because they need to breathe deeper to take in more air to get the same amount of oxygen, because the oxygen's thinner. Now, this, of course, is going to change certain behaviors that are unseen. Okay, that very act of having a wider chest might cause certain things to be slightly different. And the behavior might be simply, let's think of a very practical thing. Well, you might tend to turn your body sideways to go through doors as you're wider, or whatever. There's a lot of practical and fundamental things that living a certain way or having a certain attribute that will change the way you think or feel or act, and even affect your emotions and your language, which is another interesting thing because people's language affects their thought process. And a lot of times the language and whatnot can be affected by something like that, like the altitude, or certain other factors. If people have to spend more time shouting, they might develop a different language than people who are spending more time close together and speaking. So if you have a environment that with a lot of predators and you huddle together and you sneak more and you whisper more, then your language is going to come out far different than if you live on a mountainside where, you know, all predators are easy to see or spot from far away. So so being able to yell and communicate from long distances to warn each other is a greater attribute. This is going to change the whole language structure. It's going to change the whole way people communicate, the kind of people that they are and the kind of people they become in this modern society is all going to be based on a lot of these simple environmental things that affect the DNA, affect all these things on how we come to be. So there's definitely an overlap on that environment versus, nature versus nurture. We've seen it study after study trying to prove either finds both true. Every time. So as we pile these things together and start to look at them, we're looking for how do we get to the behavior of the people the way they are now? Because looking back, looking to the natural selection, looking to how people are, the base nature is not how the base things that we deal with. But we're already what we are. We can't become a computer user human. We are humans who use computers. We didn't evolve in that manner. And that is why so many of our inventions and our creations and our computers and the way we use them, of course, mimic all those things, all these, natural occurrences. Most people use Windows, and a window is metaphorically, literally, and literature-wise been used to describe insight and being able to see or to glean something more. And so we always bring it back to the base. But let's get back to the DNA and some of the things that that have bearing there. But let's take a quick look here. Ataku Kagura? I probably just made that bad. Great Twin, Yama. Camtastic. Oh, my love. There's my love. So there's several theories, but the two main schools, the main camps are this progressive DNA change through evolution, and then these big changes that happen periodically, which actually I believe both are true, and there's science that supports both. And we can see some of the more social, behavioral plateaus and spikes are more obvious. There are, inventions, or I should say parallel thinking that goes on throughout the human cultures of the world at about the same times. Now, astrologists have looked at this and said, well, there's this rotation of the galaxy in every 2,000 years, 2,500 years-ish. There's this renaissance of human understanding, and then we fall into a more depraved, warlike state for some time, and then it evens out. But right now, we are in that volatile time. We are in that time of the renaissance, of the upswing. And that is beginning, and that's leading us rapidly towards that less desirable stigma of the warlike state that has actually, unfortunately, looks very obvious in the Cummings. When we look at the cultural changes, when we look at the, when we compare it to, Rome, the golden age of Rome, there's a lot of parallels on a global stage. But let's talk a little bit more about how this DNA can affect our behavior. And to do that, let's just talk a little bit more about what they've done messing around with DNA. So there's these, when you hear about DNA, you're going to hear some conflicting numbers that are very confusing at times. So you'll hear things like we're 98% the same as chimpanzees. And that is 100% true. But then you could also hear, well, you're 50% the same as your sibling, your brother. And you think, well, I thought I was 98%, to a chimp. How can I only be 50 when it comes to my own kin? And basically the simple answer, the short answer, and the answer I can actually speak to and understand is that we're talking about different types of the genome and the DNA. So if your genes are the same as a monkey, 98%, that means it's 98% the same as in the gene types that make us humans, that make us bipedal. We have hips, we have, the similar bone structure, not like a tree. We don't have tree trunks. We don't have the genes that tell us to have leaves. We don't have antlers. So in that respect, in those genus types and those broad base pairs, we are 98% similar. Now, when we go down to the very individual traits and how those develop and are affected, that's where we get that 50% like my brother and 50% not. Whereas, of course, we're 98% like as in a chimpanzee is to us, as I am to him, my brother. But so there's these different types of classifications. Okay, so that's what you want to keep in mind. Now, we talked a little bit last week, and we talked a little bit earlier about how the DNA, what traits are inheritable by the DNA. Now we know, people have learned we some of the introductory classes for other things that are not, in this macrobiology will tell you about the hair color and how, this eye color is more dominant than that eye color, or this or that, or this eye color usually goes with the gene that gives somebody more tolerance to pain, or different things like that. So, and these are exploratory studies that are done, not always tracing back to the actual gene pair, but just in behavioral study that is most likely, or is found over peer review more often than not. Now, to look at all those different numbers is to be in those fields of study. And of course, we can't expect to try to do that. So what we're trying to do is get a base understanding of the different philosophies. So as we explore our world, we have that knowledge base to then make our own decisions. And that's why Mondays matter. But these, so there's 64 basic codes for the DNA, just like 64-bit computing. Now, a lot of these little instructions are just that. They tell what other ones to do. And they, they'll tell, turn on, turn off, this, that. So some of them are more recipe of, or what tools to use and how to bake, how long to bake the thing, not just the ingredients for the cake. So now of those, but within these code, the 64 command codes, we'll say, base command codes and recipes, there are 20 amino acids. So your ingredients are only 20 amino acids, period. I mean, that's all we have discerned. So science tells us 20 amino acids, and then this 64 different pairs of coatings take those amino acids and turn them into proteins. And proteins fit together with other receptors and other proteins like jigsaws. They're literally made with shapes that fit other shapes. And they literally fit together with other things only because those shapes are attracted to each other because they fit. It's really as simple as puzzle pieces. It's literal and linear in that respect in a lot of ways, even though I'm oversimplifying it. So we have these codes that take these amino acids and turn them into these proteins. These proteins are the building blocks that make everything that we are. Okay? Then so this has been a known thing, and people know about this and say, okay, they can say, well, DNA, blah, blah, blah. If we can, replace this and tell this, that, and put this information here, maybe we can this or that. And that was all wonderful thinking and logic. And we thought, well, we can take behavior right out. We found that this thing makes a person psychotic. So if we just clip that out, what we found is that's not how things work. We couldn't completely manipulate in plants even all the desired effects we want. Now we've done a lot of amazing things and been able to splice like we do a branch of a tree onto another, like a botanist would, with DNA. And it's amazing. And as far as morally, I don't think it's any different than doing that with a tree. But I think the ramifications are greater, obviously. Just because DNA in a mammal does things a lot quicker, and that's why there's going to be repercussions. A tree doesn't get much done. It doesn't really walk. Even if the tree did walk, it would take it a long, years to get across the yard, going slowly under the ground by growing roots and, manipulating the water and the roots, which plants can do. But their behavior is a little bit more sedimentary, whereas ours is far more volatile. So, for instance, now they take some of the base DNA, and that's what we're talking about, the base DNA, and how this creates these proteins that can then affect our behavior. So let's go right to an experiment that was done that affects behavior of a creature. Mice, they took out the FOXP2, I have no idea, anyway, piece of the genome. They cut it out, and they replaced the human portion that would go in that spot. And these mice all of a sudden started singing every Disney song. No, not true. Not everyone. Just a few of them. No, I don't know if they actually sang the songs, but they became more vocal. Okay? And I don't know if that's where the premise of Pinky and the Brain came, or any of these other things, and I don't even know exactly when this was done. I'm sure it's not too long ago because we haven't been splicing genes for that long. But they had far more range of vocal stimulus ability and use. So I found that to be very interesting. But now what we're finding now, let's talk a little bit. Let me see here if I want to do. So as we look at the big changes, the big steps, now the next big step in our understanding of the DNA and the RNA and this type of thing is what makes the DNA do what it does. Because what we found is you can have these recipes and they don't necessarily turn on. So we can say that blue eyes are dominant, but sometimes it happens that two blue-eyed people have a brown-eyed baby because there's a gene from someone in the past, and for some reason, this non-dominant gene makes it through. There's mutations, of course. Now, these mutations, some of them are consequential, some of them are non-consequential. Now, when I was watching my behavioral science study show, there was a lot of talk about, why it's consequential, why it's not consequential, as far as how many base pairs there are available, which ones get skewed. And there was a lot of technical talk about that, but I don't think it really led me to any epiphany or helped my awareness of how then it would become behavioral. But I can say that it's very interesting. It's very worth a look to absorb that information. I don't know how or that I've absorbed it well enough to have it be good or useful. But the one thing that I found was the most interesting, and I think it's where people miss how much we've changed our environment. Let me just start with that. We've changed our environment a lot. We have a lot of highly concentrated chemicals and toxic things and carcinogens and things of this nature that we come into contact with. Now, the body has not had a lot of time to adapt and overcome or to be, so there's mutations that are happening, cancers and mutations within the body that may eventually be, or some of them could be advantageous. But that's part of the evolution. And since we are changing our environment real fast, this looks like another one of those plateau and moves in evolution intellectually and physically. There's been a lot of changes in the human physical aspects as of late, not necessarily for the better. But just like the breeding happens in these rats, in us too, they were able to breed rats. Now, it wasn't just intentionally to create more anxious rats, but they have rats, a whole group, that are far more anxious, have more anxiety than another group. And the different, they can now do tests about, the high anxiety rats versus the low anxiety rats and some of the ways that they deal with, the mazes and the different things that they do to study the behavioral science of the conditioning and rats in that way, which has been very helpful for humans as far as it works on people too. Every single time that they get rats to do a certain particular thing one way or the other, then they can get humans to do the same basic thing, as long as, the subject isn't aware of the experiment, or if they need to be aware of it, that be part of it, whatever. As long as the control's done, it's almost 100%. It's crazy how much we do like the rats do. But albeit that these, experiments are very set up, as in there's the control and it is behavioral science, so it is very obvious and deliberate in its methodology and powerful in its methodology because of the understanding of the behavior. It's been tested on these rats. So now, one of the things that they did that everybody's kind of heard of before is that when they did the tests long ago with the rats, where they gave the rats the option of hitting the little bar and they get a pellet of food, or they hit the other bar on the other side of the cage and they get cocaine. And most of the time, the rats would do the cocaine till they die. They would become, even if it wasn't like an overdose, they would become malnourished because they'd keep doing that instead of eating food. And so eventually they would die, if not quickly, through overdose. Now, and that was like 90% of the rats. It was crazy. It was a high number. Now, that was a standard for years and years, decades. Now, more recently, they did another study doing the same exact thing, except for they changed something. They didn't just put it in a cage with A and B. They put it in a maze where there was a few places to get the cocaine, a few places to get food. They just hit the thing. A wheel, a balls to play with, all kinds of other activities, places to explore. The amount of rats that became physically addicted went down to under 50%. So there's a lot to be said about simply knowing you have options and keeping one's mind healthy, and then good choices then follow to keep the body healthy. And so these anxious rats that they made and these non-anxious rats that they've developed, and this was over time, generations, they bred this into them. And one of the things that they found, and one of the studies that we're looking at with people, because you can be sitting right next to somebody and their anxiety level can be quite different than yours. And so they're looking at the DNA of it. And they found that there are these benzodiazepine, which is a receptor which can be not as good at receiving this benzodiazepine, and therefore a person can remain more anxious. Now, it brought me to a thought of, well, so people are born nervous. But it's the shape of just the simple shape of them, kind of like the shape of proteins being a good match. But let's just take a look at the high anxiety. First, what we're looking at is higher awareness, higher performance. One's anxious, one's alert. Now, if the situation's unnatural, like you're in a cage or in a maze, a rat in a maze, in a cage, and you've been over the maze, you know it. We know that these rats can learn these mazes and get them down. Even their offspring, a rat that went through a maze a bunch of times in his life, their offspring figure out the maze faster than rats whose parents didn't master that maze in their lifetime. So there is but these heightened awareness, these anxious creatures are having trouble after the initial surge of, being heightened awareness, being able to get through the maze quicker, being able to solve the puzzles quicker, all these types of things. It goes the other way. There becomes a melancholy, and the anxiousness creates difficulty in making decisions because there's not a new environment. There's not a real threat to be anxious about. And so it cannot be appeased. And so that continues. Now, that's more of an environment-made thing, but these rats' DNA makes them more anxious. And they did that, and it wasn't really they didn't do that by injecting them. Hey, Mercy. They didn't do this by injecting them with anxiety over and over generations. It was conditioned into them. And that's something that happens in cultures a lot, is that there's an anxiety conditioned into people. But then we find that there is literally a different shape of benzodiazepine receptor in the brain that makes it hard for those proteins to match up. Now, how does one deal with this? Or what does that matter? How is this behavioral understanding going to, thank you for the host, how is this behavioral understanding going to help me or help me understand me or help me, in any way? Well, one of the things that is I shouldn't say new to me a little bit, finding out more about, or is the new study or focus in the world of DNA, are the RNA and the enzymes that control the DNA. So now we thought that the DNA was the Rosetta Stone, but what we're really finding is that's just a set of instructions. That's just like, but the oil, the grease, the bushings, the rubber that hits the road is this RNA and the enzymes that actually affect. They cause these things to turn on and off at what amount. So, yeah, sure, DNA says we're going to make a hip bone, but we got to know where to start and stop. How many cells turn into that hip bone? How do they get in their proper order? There has to be a conductor. There has to be ways to get those proteins to the spot. There's like, imagine the administration of the DNA to create a living thing. Well, that's what all these parts do. And so we're seeing that this administration, these RNA and these enzymes that are actually the ones that are prescribing the DNA and the different amino acids to be turned into different shapes that we call proteins. Now, again, how does this have to do with how I behave? The DNA, the RNA, enzymes, proteins, all these things that we're talking about are affected by all the little decisions we make every day. The frequency of vibration that we allow around us. These electric engines and fans and motors that create an electromagnetic field. The music that we listen to. The way in which we walk. The air we breathe and the way we breathe. All these little tiny things. What we eat, how we chew, all of them have an effect on these base things that we're made out of. Now, they're tough, these base things. They're ingrained. What they do, how they do it is ingrained. So an ultrasound doesn't cause a baby to mutate. Right. 40 to 50%. That was going over that. You're 50% the same DNA wise as your sibling, but 98% the same as a chimp. And both those things are true because we can talk about, because in those, when they're talking about those two different things, they're talking about the types of genes as far as DNA goes. So you have your base pairs and your major things that say bones and blood and veins, not a tree, not antlers. And in that respect, you have those types of genes where we're, in that respect, in those major types of genes, we are 50% a cabbage. And we're made out of the same things as a star, the same base elements. We're a bunch of carbon. And or let's see, what's my favorite? Ugly sex of mostly water. That's how the crystalline entity sees us. Yeah, those are fun facts. But then in the more specific traits of DNA, we are 50% like our siblings. There's an old saying that actually comes prior to, which is interesting, it comes prior to the knowledge of the DNA as we know it in the modern era. But it's an old saw going back thousands. But I would lay my life down for 2 brothers or 8 cousins. And there's a longer, it goes on, or blah, 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 blah. But it basically tells you what is that those 2 brothers, 50-50, you're 50% your sibling. As far as the traits, the individual traits. And so 2 would make up you, or cousins is 20%. So as far as that being some old saw or cliche, as far as the ones, what they would risk everything for. It makes sense. And it makes sense that they did get it close, that were accurate to the DNA, because this saying came about, and in multiple cultures, actually, the same ratio, because that's how families work. That's how the math works when you have to divide an estate or things of that nature. And so this ingrained thing that is a modern math study of the base of DNA is also a behavioral understanding that came way before the factual knowledge of the DNA, and had to do with how people would inherit or divide or requisition within a family or tribal unit. That causes mutations in the DNA is what that does. Now, that's interesting. Of course, I couldn't answer that question, and I don't think anybody could clearly answer that question. I think what they could tell you is that they could study those types of things and find out, but I don't know if there's been a sibling, since most cultures don't allow or don't condone, either legally or socially, that sort of thing. That close incest. Blue Lagoon in it, yeah. Perhaps a little Blue Lagooner. But what we do know is that it causes certain mutations that have consequence. There's been neurological disorders, physical dilemmas, and that might have to do with these turning the RNA and the enzymes that turn on and off and prescribe these DNA. Since there were so many similarities, there might be just some overlap. There might be some too many chefs in the kitchen, if you will, sibling rivalry within the very DNA structure, and that makes sense because it also lends itself to the social behaviors of siblings and sibling rivalry, because you'll find that when it comes to a biological imperative like procreation, passing on the genes, which isn't a necessity in modern times, which is some we'll get into in later episodes as we get further into the study of the behavioral science. But these types of what's the example I wanted to use? Like a sibling wants to, you have an older sister, and the biological imperative, she's, young, and she's got teenager who's got hormones galore, and so there's that biological imperative. Now, she doesn't have the biological imperative outright, right? She can't have that understanding and be okay with it. She's not supposed to go have a baby tonight, but she has the hormonal biological imperative, right? She has the biological imperative to attract a mate. She has the biological imperative to want to be wanted by whomever it is she wants to be wanted by, whether it's, and now in our modern age, again, we don't have to have the biological imperative to procreate. Okay, that's almost easy. It's almost a no-brainer. If we really want to procreate, we don't even have to really get with somebody. We can just pay somebody to make it happen. So many different ways. It's scary. So that imperative's changed. So it could be simply to date, even if it's same-sex dating, it doesn't matter. It still has the same biological imperative feel as far as you're getting ready for the date. You want to impress that person, and your younger sibling, who isn't necessarily in the running for this, okay? If there's no sibling rivalry there, then they're going to help with that, They're going to help, They're gonna tell the guy something on the phone. Oh, you gotta wait or whatever. They're gonna play along with whatever narrative they're trying to do to bait this person, or however it is they go about it. This sibling might help. Now, even if they're in competition, let's say there's two guys and they like the same girl and they're brothers and they're, just a year apart or something like that. I've been there. One might help the other or not. But you'll see this cooperative thing within families because why? Why would I help my brother? Okay. If I'm interested in this girl, I might acquiesce to the whole situation and help him because it helps me. That's 50% me who will be carried on in that gene. So I'm helping that. Now, even like I said, even this is if it's, in our modern age, we don't think that way. I'm not thinking that. But that biological imperative is still in there. Those feelings, those hormones, that the DNA that creates all these things that we really don't have the immediate control over, understanding and how control the feelings, they're just there. So as he's getting ready and I'm, helping him out, maybe letting him wear the shirt that he wants to wear that's mine, or borrow a pair of shoes, or whatever it is, we help our siblings far more often than we're going to help somebody else in the dating game because they're part of our lineage. Why do we care about our family progressing over somebody else? Is it just because we're familiar with them? When it comes to this aspect of dating and mating and doing, all these different things, it's because they're part of us, because 50%, 20%, whatever it is, that is also us. It's a vicarious thing. I have, right, family name. That's the whole thing. I have no idea what the heck that means, because that's like, to me, that seems ridiculous, because what's in a name? Nothing. I mean, I get that people get into it. It's just the same, but that's I think on a biological level, I get that, you want to procreate, period. You want to pass it on. But as a social name thing, moniker, I totally get it. Like, I understand why it exists for so many reasons, legalities and social and, estate wise, and because of possessions and so many things. But it literally means nothing because, like, my last name was made when several Irish and Scottish groups got together and created a last name, a group, kind of like a clan. And so, a bunch of people from, like, I think 6 families gave up their last name. And I'm sure at the time they kind of kept their last name. It's not like the people that were living at that moment just gave up that name. They probably didn't change their name. It was, Billy something something under the clan something something or other. And then Billy's last name got dropped and it was just clan something, after the story told of him in generations. And so these are how things fade in and out. Like, everybody thinks that there is some possible way to become immortalized in yeah, that's way back. I have Irish, Scottish, German, and something else. English. Very pink. Everybody that I come from, pink. I'm pink. That's why I'm so pink. Yeah, I got German, French, and English, which means that I know where to dig the hole, how to dig the hole, and I don't mind doing it. You're German and French, so you know where to dig the hole and why, and you'll get around to it. You will get around to it. After I finish this cigarette. Perhaps. Right? Hi, Evil. You guys are coming in here towards the end. I'm running out of material. I can only prepare so much for Monday Matters because this requires an incredible amount of me learning. I'm kind of taking a self-taking a class on human behavior, or behavioral science, I should say. Well, we talked about the DNA and how the different proteins are made by the DNA to create what we are. And that the DNA, as we thought we could just clip and snip and create something new, isn't how it works per se, because the RNA and enzymes are the ones that are the chefs of the kitchen, and the DNA is simply the recipe books and some of the tools used to make that out of. But the building blocks are that amino acid that gets turned into the proteins. Now, these proteins are what make us what we are: our bones, our skin, our everything's, and the way we feel about things very often. And we ended up just talking about the biological imperatives that we have based on our family structures, because our DNA is so shared through this tribal and family thing that we have a automatic understanding and will and want to see success within our siblings and other family members. One of the sayings that came before DNA understanding was, I would give my life for 2 brothers or 6 cousins or 8 cousins, something like that, because that is the genetic differences and similarities there. Thomas D. No. What's up? We got Evil in the house. Aurora, mercy, mercy me. So we're talking about how evolution in some ways is that progressive slow line, and in some ways, as well as our social and behavioral, there are like steps that happen, long periods of inactivity within the social behavioral changes, within the genetic changes, and then boom, big changes happen in short periods of time. Both of these theories have been put out there by, people who study fossils to people who study, other things, and both have been given merit on both ends. So we know that there's a steady understanding that both happen. There are traits that are gradual, and there are traits that happen quickly over short periods of time, and obviously that is due to, climate changing, the change of a particular for humans, inventions do huge things to change our behavioral genetics. Because behavioral genetics, we're finding, are far more volatile than the physical genetics, or the, shall I say, mutations thereof. So we're less likely to, in 3 generations, develop better climbing genetics, whereas even if we had a bunch of people climbing all the time, in 3 generations they'd be better at it. There'd be no doubt their kids might be more suited to it. But behaviorally, if you have 3 generations of people who are, yeah, do you like the bow tie? I got to get a not green one. I have black and green. I'm gonna get some bow ties. I'm gonna get better at tying them too. This stream starts at 8:18, not 8 o'clock, because it takes me extra time to tie the bow tie. Anyway, all right. So we were going over that, how these changes and how they affect behavior. Now, in the first show, and we'll kind of bring that up to speed, we talked about the differences in how people act versus like the chimpanzees, for instance, as far as the social behaviors that come from the evolution when we look at it socially. So if you have a group of people, or let's just look at the chimps versus the baboons real quick again. The baboons have a matriarchal. The females stay where the males leave and go to different tribes very often. So the males are intransient and don't have long-term family structures. The females do. Where chimpanzees, it's the opposite. The men, females leave the tribe and will go to different tribes and different families, and that's how they keep the genes, fresh and things like that. But what we find in their social structures is that baboons fight amongst each other. And so it's a lot like even in my family, where my mother was more dominant because my dad wasn't around as much, because we lived with my mother after divorce. My brother and I were more apt to fight with each other than us get together and go fight some other people. Whereas in other families that I grew up around, there was brothers who had a father around more, and they would go beat up people like in packs. I mean, 3 of the brothers, and they'd go beat up one guy. And it was horrible, And so I was just thinking today, based on that chimp baboon thing, and that chimpanzees have this more warlike thing where they're warlike, but they don't get along. They only get along with their brothers in arms. So if you agree with the chief, you're fine. If not, you're screwed. So they don't cooperate with other groups as well and things like that. Now with the baboons, where the males are combative with each other within the group more, kind of trying to impress the females and, working out their aggression on the closest person. They don't get together and go mess up their neighbors. But they're more cooperative with the neighbors. So this matriarchal cooperativeness and this patriarchal dominant type thing made me wonder. I wonder how many, as far as like in the to be political and direct, how many people I wonder in the Senate and the Congress on the right wing and left wing. I would love to see who has male or female dominant homes that they come from. I'll bet anything that Democrats, because Democrats are generally more apt to work with people, whereas Republicans are generally more combative and more of a competitive structure, traditionally. So they would lend themselves to those. So maybe the Republicans are more like chimpanzees and the Democrats are more like baboons. You can be sure they're both monkeys, or at least wings of the same bird. Yes. Well, no, chimpanzees were 98, same as chimpanzees and baboons and just about any primate. We're very, very close to all the primates. Like lemurs, we're very close to lemurs. And, dolphins, we're still 60% like dolphins, I think, even though we don't have the bone. I'm not actually thinking then that's when it goes down to like the 50% when we start looking at different body shapes and stuff. Yeah, holidays, bad blood. Well, one of the things you can do is ask your body to use your benzodiazepine receptors to fit the situation. Understanding why people are they were makes it easier. So maybe when bad blood, if there's bad blood that starts, if it has to do with you, just own yourself. Think to yourself, am I a baboon or am I a chimpanzee? And then you can tell either one to shut up. Now, if it doesn't have to do with you directly and somebody else is chimping out or babooning out, then you can just simply say, to yourself, oh, look, a chimpanzee, a baboon. And remember, in the time of chimpanzees, I was a monkey. The butane in my veins and a mouth to cut the junkie. With the plastic eyeballs, you just spray paint the vegetables. And the dog food stalls with the beefcake pantyhose. You just kill the headlights and put in neutral. There's a stock car flaming with a loser at the cruise control. Babies in Reno with a vitamin D. There's a couple of couches. You can just go sleep on the love seat. So it came saying I'm insane to complain about a shotgun wedding and a stain on my shirt. Don't believe everything that you breed. You'll get a parking violation and a maggot on your sleeve. Just save your face with some mace in the dark and save all your food stamps burning down the trailer park. Yo. Just, what are you going to do? So, but that we're back to that anxiousness that you're feeling, and there's kind of going back to the mice that they made more anxious than the high level mice and the low level mice. Well, sure, there's a lot of anxiousness, and there should be, because people are confused, and everybody's got these crosses that they're bearing, and half of these crosses that people bear are imaginary ones that have the most weight. I'll do the second verse later. It's almost like there's too much information, so you just got to hold on to whatever's going to shield you from all that. What are we creating with our culture? These situations where it's difficult to get together with family. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, and if somebody stopped by unannounced, it was awesome. And now it's like, people turn the lights off, pretend they're not home. What used to be isn't socially and cultural anymore. There's a lot of separation. There's a lot of need for us to connect. That's why we're here, because we want to connect. I want to connect with you. You want to connect with me. And that's why we're here right now. We want to talk about things that are interesting or whatever. We want to make that human connection. And it's difficult to do in person, right in the face of the people we're supposed to do it with. And I think one of the big things about that is this study of human behavior, is that looking at human behavior, people are starting to, we're smarter than we give ourselves credit for, and that causes us pain. But it's okay. The pain can come growth. But that we need to take the risk. And that's what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to risk knowing more, because knowing more means that you cannot retract to your previous understanding. Once you know something, you can't put it back in the box. Once Schrodinger's cat jumps out of the box and says, "Hi, my name's Pandora," you can't put it back. Exactly. So when you do connect with somebody, let's say, for instance, you connect with somebody and you share with them some things, and they share with you some things, and maybe they share with you too much, and maybe then you wish you didn't know that about that person. You can't put that back in the box. So let us not be afraid of that. Let us not be afraid of how we might judge. Let us not be afraid of how we might be judged. Let us not, and I don't mean just don't worry about it, man. I mean, just overthink it if it's a problem. Go ahead. If something is causing you an emotional stress, well, think about stress. Think about emotion. Think about the chemicals in the brain that cause that to happen. The lack of, synapses firing that are causing a depressive state. Think about how, simple things to do. Think about nothing. Meditate. Now, people throw that stuff out there. They say clear your mind. They say meditate. They say this. They say that. But rarely does somebody tell you how. And we'll kind of, yes, brains are such drama queens, and a lot of it we can't help. This human behavior is very hormonally based. There are many things that happen in our body we are unaware of that cause these emotions to just happen. And until we can understand ourselves, we are at their mercy. But that's the beauty of being human, is that we can have an understanding of these, and we don't even need all the scientific terms to do it. There are old cliches and pieces of philosophy and understandings that people have had far long before science came up with DNA and finding out that this particular, sequence of DNA that if, turned on at this time creates this or that or whatever, or that the amygdala oblongata creates us to be very angry. And if there's a brain tumor pushing on it, you might just absolutely go bitch cakes and not be able to control it at all. But being human, we might have an understanding of that. We might feel this rage coming on. We might go to a doctor and say, I have rage and I want to kill you. There must be something physically wrong with my base of my skull, because that's where that resides. Now, could it be a physical thing like that that affects us? Yeah. Now, is that an extreme? Yeah. Does that exclude us from being part of that on our daily life? No. Because you can rub the back of your head near the amygdala oblongata and calm yourself. You can calm yourself with many pressure points throughout your body. When I said I'd give you a practical tip on what meditation is, it is a far more simpler than what a lot of people try to do. All you have to do to clear your mind is to simply focus on what is, not what isn't. So, thoughts of things you're going to say or think or feel about the past or the future or even the present or how you feel about them are all bullocks. What is real is the fact that you're breathing. And let your mind only see or think about the diaphragm coming in and out, the air that's passing over your nostrils, in your alveoli of your lungs, and start to let go of these words. I'm using them to describe to you something, but in your mind, let them go. Simply keep, and it's hard. Thoughts will come in, and you need to passively let them go. You passively let it. I breathe in and I start thinking about wind, and then I might think of what a wind drawing looks like, and the next thing my mind is picturing a page with the really bad, just single pencil drawing of wind. But I just got to let that go. And one of the things you can start to do is bounce your mind around from the lungs to the diaphragm. As your shoulders rise, you can feel that. There's every part of your body. These are all real things that are happening right now. They are not part of the present, the past, or the future. They are not part of what you think about you. They are literal things, that the fact you can feel the air around you on your skin, the pressure of my foot on the chair, the pressure of my butt on the chair. These are sensations that are happening right now. This is meditation. This is clearing one's mind to only think of the present moment that is transpiring right now without prejudice, without thought. Every time a thought of a color or a thing or a car or something enters my mind, I passively let it go and go back to a focus on what is right now. That is oh no, mercy. While I was explaining that to you, I created a universe in my mind for a possible D&D campaign and wrote 4 jokes. So believe me, I know what it's like to have, they say a messy thing is a sign of a messy mind, messy workspace. And I got a lot going on. If you could turn the camera around here, you'd see how much is really going on. No, but that's why I need to to practice this meditation, taking these breaths, it is incredibly powerful. It affects the DNA in your body. It affects the RNA, the enzymes, how they create proteins. This affects them, this ability to meditate, this ability to clear the mind, this ability to make conscious choices about the kind of music that we will put our mind to. Now, we're going to hear music, but if we sit and listen, like actively put ourselves into a frequency of vibration via meditation, via the absence of electric engines, to find peace, to get your bare feet on the ground, to get in tune with the 7 megahertz of the world. The grounding is what people are calling it these days. 3-track mind, 8-track broken. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, the steady conscious stream of thought, and that is a fun thing to do, is to just speak your stream of thought or to write your stream of thought. It's tons of fun. Now meditation, a lot of people will think, well, I can't just go, I don't know how. It starts slow. Like sometimes when I do it, I can only do it for 2 breaths. I get 2 full breaths before a thought comes in that I have to let go. And then maybe I'll get 3, and then maybe I'll get 4, and then but I got those 2, and you can just take time to just take 2 breaths and do nothing else but that. No, thinking of nothing is impossible. That's why meditation is thinking about something directed. Of course, it's impossible to think of nothing. That's correct. That's called unconscious. That's called dead or unconscious. That is thinking of nothing. Same with every single human being. That's why meditation, when somebody says clear your mind, people go, I can't do that. But I just explained to you that it's actually the opposite of that. It is literally the opposite of what you think it is. It's filling your mind with the present moment so fully that you can let the other stuff go. Well, sometimes you dream when you're in coma, sometimes you don't. Just like you can be asleep, you can be unconscious and dream or not. Dreams are not peaceful rest. Dreams are not, to me, a dream is not a necessity of my psyche. A dream is a symptom of a problem in my psyche. If my dream is not myself projecting my conscious thought into other creatures and other places and living other lives, then it is me dealing with something I didn't deal with during the day. Because I have 2 types of dreams. That which I astrally project, and that which my id tries to work out what I could not. Other than that, my sleep is a restful healing process of meditation, which one can do in 2 breaths, just 2. So now during that time, there was maybe just a little bit of a thought of I'm streaming or blah, blah, blah. Some little words started peeking in, but I mostly was very conscious of making my brain 100% aware of the moment my fingers were clasped. I could feel each finger touching each finger profoundly, each one touching each finger. I could feel my chest rising, the air coming in and out. My brain was overclocked thinking about all these things and feeling them. So it's not your brain being too busy to be able to meditate. It's just that your brain doesn't know how to be busy enough. It's literally, I hate to say it, your brain's lazy. Not too busy. Not too scattered and too able to be creative, but the opposite of that. It's too lazy in its function, in its ability to whatever, undisciplined. So disciplining the brain by meditation makes it more active, more able to think faster, more agilely, because this made up stuff is very, when we think about the past, the present, the future, or making up scenes in my head, or I'm writing, I think of a song or a parody or a social thing that happened 6 years ago and somebody's name, just remembered that actor's name from the thing, and that's all just a bunch of malarkey and trivia. Doesn't even have to do with anything that just happened right now, other than I said it. So meditation will give you the ability to command those things, those mind, that ability, the creativeness, that amazing thing that our minds can do, which is just go, 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 go. If you discipline it through meditation, not only will you be better at the other aspect of it, but there will the anxiety, these types of things that are literal and physical and chemical, this DNA, how the enzymes in the RNA turn this stuff on and off, and your ability to make good decisions for yourself and to know what those decisions are and when you're actually making them will start to happen, because this practice of meditation, this practice of disciplining the mind to the moment, literally teaches the body how to use your inherently good traits for survival of the fittest, social behavior of the fittest on every level. Yes, it does help with lucid dreaming. Lucid dreaming, to me, again, is just the body in relaxed state while daydreaming. Daydreaming and real dreaming, to me, are the same thing. One you're just conscious and one you're not. And you're just not as good at arranging thoughts in a linear and progressive manner when you're not conscious. So when you're not conscious and this dream comes in, you don't know how to structure the dream, so the dreams will bounce around. It'll feel like, oh, I couldn't get the thing done. You have those dreams where I couldn't get up the stairs kind of thing. Well, you were always up the stairs in the dream. You just didn't literally know how to put it together. Now, a disciplined mind, one with meditation, will allow you to understand all these things. But it happens here. The crazy part is that we're talking about how we feel and think. But the crazy thing is that this meditation, this ability, this understanding, not just of meditation, but the understanding of the DNA and of frequencies and of these enzymes and the things we eat and our exercise regimens and these things like this, give us control over our behavior in more than a profound way of simply acting differently or acting more as we would like to be. But it literally can make us more physically receptive to the proteins that allow this. So in other words, like any muscle, being happy, making the right decisions, lessening one's anxiety is literally like going to the gym. There is no difference. In fact, it's harder to physically change your body's power, how much power and how much cardio you have, requires more food energy, more physical energy, more thought energy than to exercise one's brain and to make it stronger than it was the day before. It can happen faster, and there's no limit to the degree of progression. I'm only going to get so big if I was a bodybuilder. There's a limit. Now, sure, there's a limit to the brain, of course, but there is no limit to the brain compared to that of the body. I could take steroids and still there would be a limit to what my frame can hold. The brain is so untapped potential that comparatively speaking, it's the difference between shooting a bullet and throwing one as far as how much limit. Like, I'm not limited to how far I can walk in a lifetime, except for that I can't walk across water. So I wouldn't be able to circumvent the globe just walking without some pretty serious help. But how much the brain can walk is how far can you walk across the universe with space shoes. Yes, enzymes, I mean, they're found in all the real foods, especially the real foods, things that are made by nature, that are not messed around with. Cheese is a pretty close one. There's not a lot of process in cheese. It's moldy milk, molded to perfection. Oh yeah, just like people who are on Prozac could just eat, what is it? Pistachio, not pistachios, cashews. Could eat cashews and get the exact same enzymes and proteins that these drugs are trying to emulate. There is no prescription drug that cannot be ingested by food. The only ones that are pretty specialized that human beings, they're very helpful, is the penicillin, which is really just a cultured mold. It's just mold. So there really is. So the idea that modern medicine or some pill has the answer has been the cultural downfall that we have fallen into. Instead of drinking orange juice, we're taking vitamin C pills, and our body can't process that stuff as well. We've proven that diuretically a long time ago. It didn't slow anybody down. Yeah, nuts are amazing. The natural foods, potatoes and onions and tomatoes and these things that get the different gourds and fruits and vegetables. And these are the things that humans are meant to eat. It is how we can be healthier and happier right off the bat. Allergic to penicillin. Then they got the moxicillin for a lot of people who are allergic to penicillin. And they also have, I forget what the other one's called. But guess what? It's all the same stuff. It's all molds. It's all, different types of mold. There are gentlemen who eat, there's a guy who eats, I know it's more than one, but there's one I saw in particular that eats nothing but rotten meat. Won't eat cooked meat because it cooks most of the protein out. But raw meat isn't real good for you either, per se, as far as the way red meat anyway. But if you take red meat and you allow it to have certain bacterias break it down for you before you eat it, it's a completely different animal, literally, and it does amazing things. Now, and allergies are actually very interesting, I found out, because they are not a constant thing. Somebody might be deathly allergic to peanuts. I'm not saying that at some point in their life they're not going to be allergic to peanuts, but the severity, how it interacts and how it affects the body changes throughout someone's life. For instance, you can develop allergies to things by constant exposure to them. You can get rid of an allergy by micro exposure, kind of like an inoculation. Depending on the person, the allergy, it's all very specific. Like, I am far more allergic to like gas fumes. Like, when I was a kid, when I was like, I'd smell gas and I like the smell of gas. I didn't sit there and huff it, but so now if I smell just the smallest hint of gas, it's just nauseating. I get nauseous and dizzy and I've developed this you know, non-tolerance to certain things. Same thing has happened with a lot of people with latex, from the use of, just putting the condom onto it. No, but actually from latex gloves in hospitals and stuff, that's right out the door now. No more latex gloves because people started, well, almost everybody will develop a allergy to it. It happens. So, one of the things I wanted to, we're going to start to wrap it up here, because only so much we can say about DNA and RNA with the knowledge base that I have for the, we got your sheepskin condoms, animal skin condoms. I believe that you said you were part German, right? I think that was it the Germans that started using sheepskin as condoms way back. Of course, it was us Irish who started taking them out of the sheep first. They use the sheep intestines. We started taking them out. Get it? Get it? Okay, so the Germans, sheep's using sheep intestines as condoms, but then if you take the intestines out of the sheep first before you use it because they were banging sheep, because jokes are funnier when you have to explain them, right? So that gets me to where I wanted to bring this all to a head, and that is yeah, it was the Scots. It was. I'm Scottish Irish, so I'm on both sides of that coin. You just spin me in the air and I'll land with a condom on. So when we look at the DNA and the different changes, we were talking about evolutionary changes in behavior and in people and in physical and how those happen on a gradual linear scale, and how there's some things that happen on a step-like scale where the things remain the same, and then boom, technology or the environment make drastic changes happen very quickly. And that happens on a, evolutionary stage, I should say. Now, but when we're talking about the human behavior in the modern era, we have to keep putting it under the filter that we are not being subjected to the natural course of humans anymore. We have our man-made modern life. So all the things that gave us our standard understanding and move and poise is all very unnecessary. So the actual reasons for why we act the way we do that we're not sure of, like, why did I do that? Why am I acting this way? Why is that person acting this way? Blah, blah, blah. Well, we're not dealing with the same base that we were evolved to. We changed that. The classic white male. So in all that, our cultures dictate a lot of our behavior, and then we have to take the evolutionary behavior and match it against that. So what kind of culture have we cultivated here in the United States? And that's where I wanted to kind of wrap this up with talking about that. So we have this, procreation behavior. We want our families and our lineage and our biological imperative to move on. And Europe became full, and there was all these religious things going on, and people are, starting to associate their biological imperative to wealth imperatives. The Renaissance already happened. We already had industry. We didn't have the industrial revolution yet, but we had industry. We had people and places and things and more goods and services than ever before. It had already really exploded. And so people using manifest destinies, some of the most horrific words ever uttered by humans, and came to the United States, committing genocide and creating this illusion, saying we have this new world, this new territory, this new beginning, a untapped paradise. But we brought our same issues with us. Wait, if we evolved to a human standard? I don't understand that. I do imagine what would be, like, what small things would change humans, like what little things, like when I'm creating Dungeons and Dragons worlds, I'll think of little biological things that then affect the whole evolutionary process, and then that animal... I just don't know what stand art is. What is stand art? Stand art is feline? Is it like from a video game or something? Felines and canines are evolving to be more human as we speak. But that's not, see, but that's the thing when we talk about the development and stuff, it's the world and then us in it. I think that in this world, if you took this world and made it 100 times but made the world the same, and then you'd always keep coming up with the same things. I don't believe there would be on this other world dogmen that are more Kinnan and have longer protruded things slightly. I just don't think you'd see that. I think that everything happened because of a course of long, strident, and precise evolutionary things that just simply happen. The mutations are so minor and slow, and from what science has shown us, there's just no real variance other than the soup that you start with in the pot, the size of the pot. Yeah, so, but birds evolved instead of monkeys. They did evolve with monkeys. That's my point. They did. They literally evolved as much as monkeys did. So you'd always have the same thing that we have now if the world was the same. Now, if you created another world and you just changed one thing, just made it 60% water instead of 70%, then you'd get different stuff. You'd have way different stuff. Take the same world and make it so that it takes twice as long for the vegetation to grow all over the world. It took billions of years. I forget how many billions of years for the world to cool and become vegetated, or whatever point you want to start from the first plant to cover the world covering before we just deforested it in a blink of an eye. if you change that aspect or change the base of the plate tectonics, or our world is made of mostly nickel. Let's say if you made it more iron or than nickel, how would the frequency of ours is at 7 megahertz. If, let's say, it was 13 megahertz because it was a different size, change the size of the Earth. Those types of things, I think then you're going to come up with possible bird people. But our culture today, right, exactly. That's what I do with the Dungeons and Dragons. That's how I make new worlds. I make the world, I see how it's different than ours. I take that difference, and then I see how is that going to affect the ecology, the biology, and then based on the biology and ecology changes, how is that going to change behavioral, right down to, boom, this is a really cool way that they use nunchucks. So, but what culture are we making here is one that has been very competitive, very dominant, very chimp-like. And now we're seeing more matriarchal stuff starting to enter our culture. And so we're getting more democratic leaning, more people fighting amongst ourselves instead of fighting against the world. Like most of our conflicts outside of the United States are us giving money to other little dictators and changing regime changes and things like that. Our soldiers aren't fighting as much. They're getting into skirmishes because insurgents are attacking them, but our soldiers aren't boots on the ground trying to take new territory. We just bomb the shit out of something, get them out of there, and we go in. But we usually just arm other people. And so we're not chimping out. We're not growing this patriarchal society of go beat them up. So we're infighting. We're fighting against each other. It's more dangerous to go to high school than it is to join the service. You have more chance of getting shot dead in high school than you do joining the military service in the United States. Like, way more. Like, way more. I think last year, 10 servicemen died in combat? That wasn't friendly fire? Right? No, I think 12, and I think that includes friendly fire, and I think then last year there was over 100 kids killed? It's like 10 to 1. It's like that. It's like crazy. Because we don't put our men in harm's way out there anymore. But we have this culture that is very baboon-like. We're attacking each other. And it's been that culture because we've been competitive. We had to first we beat up the Indians, then we had to try to compete to keep the slaves down. Now that they're competing against us, then against the one percenters and the people keeping them down, and then women are competing to get vote, and all these things should have already been, but there was a competition to get them. And I know that happened in a lot of countries. You're right. We need to unite, not fight, and that's what I'm hoping. This vacuum of men. I love that. I hated that men were not being responsible, but now I like it. Men were not being as responsible in our country, leaving their families, so single moms raising kids. Lots of that's going on. Those numbers shot up big time, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I thought that was bad, but no, that's good. Let the boys fight amongst each other so we're not fighting other people. I don't think all us boys should get together and go fight other countries and kill people and commit genocide and shit like that. I think we should get along. And I think a matriarchal society can allow that a little bit more. Sure, there might be a little bit of infighting, but overall brings us together. Now, how do we bust this culture up a little bit more and make it more inclusive and make it more like so we can be more of the democracy we want to be and less of the republic of control? Like, how do we say we're going to get along? Like, I'm not even talking about, voting for politics or saying Democrats are better than Republicans. I mean it more as a sense of more of a democratic feel for the way we treat each other than a Republican we want people to champion our causes. And I think the best way to do that is to do what made our country do that in the first place. What gave us the greatest surge of community, of getting along and Well, it's after the Civil War when we came together, really. Immigrants, people coming from other cultures, bringing different ideas of community into our fold. That's what will save us. That's what will make us great. We need an insurgence of these good, wonderful Muslim people who need a new place to live. I've been studying the Muslim religion. It's great. I mean, it's got way more be cool to each other than the Christian religion, like way more in text. Like it's night and day how much better as far as if you follow it in a pragmatic way, it's way better than Christianity as far as being cool to each other. And you're going to be cleaner. Well, I could tell you some about it, but that's a whole huge topic, and maybe we can do that next week. We'll talk about theology maybe a little bit more. I'm trying to follow for Monday's Matter. I'm trying to follow this behavioral science course that I'm digesting. But one of the things that it suggested is that groups from other places, when they have a system that works and then they're introduced to another group, if they have an advantageous quality, that will ripple out throughout that culture. So, for instance, I'll give you one example of one religious group, Judaism. When a large portion of Jewish people came to the United States, Second World War, a few people wanted to leave Europe that were Jewish. But when they came here, one of the things that they had as part of their social structure was low-interest loans to one another. They gave low-interest loans to one another. This was an advantageous thing in American society. It allowed them to succeed way more than other people because they're giving each other low-interest loans. Now we find that had rippled effect, and we call it hard money lending. It's when rich guys help out other people that they think were going to do well with their money, and it's called hard money lending. You don't have to show them anything. The guy just says, here's hard money. Here's money that I have, not some equity loan of some kind. So these little things, these different types of cultural things that give advantageous social behavior or advantageous in an economic way or in a pragmatic way, like when you look at other cultures like Japan, which are very cooperative. Now, in our country, we shame people for shaming, where in Japan, shame is very normal. And it's how people, keep a constant respect for each other. But it comes from respect. They respect each other first, and so are shameful if they disrespect somebody, not shameful of themselves without respect for others. It's because it's a side effect. Here, shame is what we use to attack someone. So that there's all these little microcultural things and religious things or whatever that have an advantage in these groups that we need to integrate into the United States. So immigration is going to be the best savior of the United States, not just physical, but mental immigration. Things like this, getting online, talking to people from other cultures, sharing other cultures with people in this culture, and letting that happen. I remember there are so many times in my life that I made the right choice, not because of American culture, because I watched Kung Fu theater, because I was into this Asian martial arts when I was a kid and I thought it was cool. And there was a lot of things about, the way one acts and being, proper and modest that kept me far more modest and proper than I would have ever been without that. And that was just, happenstance that I happened to be into that. But that's that cultural sharing, that ripple effect that different qualities that are good have that are good. Yeah, but our President Trump is a symptom of a problem. And one of the bigger problems in the United States, and everybody knows this, is that everybody wants to live their own narrative. They want to dictate what their life is, how it is. They want to describe who they are with the adjectives they want to use. Everybody does this in America. Everybody does this. Instead of asking what they are from others, like people do in other cultures and people do reflectively, we force what we are upon other people and take what we want from other people. That's been my biggest problem in my life, is that people always think I'm something I'm not. They think oh, you're that guy. You're the guy that this, that, that. And it's like, I'm not that guy for you. Sorry. And I think everybody goes through that a lot, where people think you're something you're not, or they want you to live up to an expectation that you're not even interested in. But so we all want to just, retreat. And that little part in us, no matter how small it is Donald. We all have a little Donald in us, that little id that wants to dream about wonderful things, that wants to wake up and have won the lottery, that thinks that they would be good if they had $1 billion. That little personist that thinks if I had $1 billion, I'd know what to do with it. I'd do the right thing. I'd be philanthropic. I'd save the world. I'd be fucking Batman. Bullshit. Okay? Bullshit. You wouldn't be able to be Batman. You can't develop that shit. And if you could, you'd sell it. And if you didn't, No, Batman's a douche. Batman could never make up for his company's evil, stopping a couple bad guys at night. No way. Unfortunately, Wonder Woman's one of the better ones, but I can't pull that off either. I don't have the hips. No, but see, Iron Man, I want to be Iron Man. I always wanted to be Iron Man, just for the tech stuff. But again, Tony Stark, the Stark family, they sold so many weapons. He would have to save literally like 1 billion people, and then he'd only be scratching the surface of making up for the horrible evil that Stark Company has put out there. So I love cosplaying him, yes. So you got to be Tony Stark without Stark Industries. You got to be Batman without Wayne Enterprise. That's who I am. You got to be a hero who's ordinary, because it's little tiny things that make miracles what they are. We proved that last night. Did we not? Did we not? I witnessed a miracle. Okay, that's all the stuff on my cards, but if you guys have any... Spider-Man, there you go. Spider-Man is the ultimate superhero. Okay? That's my guy. I love dressing up like Tony Stark because I look like Robert Downey Jr., but no, last night on Peachy's stream, we performed miracles. Spider-Man is the ultimate best superhero, the only real superhero. The rest of them are just posers trying, because he didn't ask for his powers, they just happened, and he didn't complain about it. He took great responsibility with that power. And the dude uses agility and foresight and prowess that he was given to his fullest ability without being a douche. And he's got really funny taglines. And the dude's just, he's friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's not out there trying to save the world. He just wants to look good. He just wants to do a little good with what he's got. Well, yeah, she's an ordinary hero. She's not a superhero. She's a superhero. Not a comic book crap hero. She's real deal. A miracle maker. Save more lives than motherfucking Superman. You know what I'm saying? I'm both. I could be either. I'm a superhero villain. You know what I mean? Like out there, I'll be like, you know, catching babies, pulling kittens out of a tree, all that stuff, but I'll I'll blow up a company. I would totally, use my X-ray super heat vision to just blow up Bob Murray's whole facility. Yeah. I would cut Bob Murray in half with my laser beam eyes. For sure. No question. There are people. To all things there are a season. So if I was super, I'd be season man. I'd be the rain. I'd be the wind. The seasons don't fear the reaper, nor do the wind or the rain or the sun. We could be like they are. But as you know, forces of evil and oppose all nightmare, ban all the music with a phony gas chamber. Am I really going to forget that? Forces of evil and oppose all nightmare, ban all the music with a phony gas chamber, because one's got a weasel and the other's got a flag. One's on the pole that shoved the other in the bag with the rerun shows and the cocaine nose job, the daytime crap with that folk singer slob. He hung himself with a guitar string. You slap a turkey neck and it's hanging from a pigeon wing. You can't write if you can't relate. So you trade the cash for the beef, for the body, for the hate. My time is a piece of wax. It's fallen on a termite. And he's choking on the splinter. I'm a loser, baby. So why don't you kill me? Sprechen Sie Deutsch, baby. Mondays matter. They do. Thank you for that. Thank you for the clap. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to do some tanking later, probably. I'll be on here tanking. I was just going to do a quick hour show, but we went at 2.5 hours. I'm actually supposed to be tanking right now. Like, my clan's probably like, where are you, dude? But I don't care. But yes, tomorrow we will be on for sure. No, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for distracting me. This has been wonderful. I appreciate the extra input. I like some of the places that we went with this. Tomorrow we have the Tuesday at 5 o'clock, where we will be doing all Christmas type music, which includes a parody that I wrote called Bells on Parade, a Rage Against the Machine song, Bulls on Parade, that I turn into a rap Christmas carol. For those of you who have never heard it, they will be doing that tomorrow. I might do a live version. I might just rap over it, right into the mic, sing along with myself. So we'll do that as the live. I do one live song on Tuesdays with Tuesday, but we're going to be we do songs, and me and my buddy, we talk about the songs and different things, and we try new songs and learn new things. Yeah, I'm going to go to my mom's after that. So right after that show, right at 6, that'll end right about 6. And then I'm going to head over to my mom's, who lives right around the corner. So I see my mom quite a bit. So it's not a big event thing per se. But I'm like Phil. I got a brother who's not fun. I mean, he can be, but it's all small doses with my family and me. I am not, unfortunately, not of the same ilk as a lot of what goes on there. My mom and I have a great relationship, though. So, and thanks to Aurora, it's gotten better over the years. So, I mean, I just have a good one. Yeah, that is a good time. Yeah, that's the 11 o'clock cards after the after all the festivities. She's doing well. My mom's doing well. Yes, yes. So, yeah, I'm going to head over there for that. And then Wednesday, of course, is Christmas. We won't be doing the cooking show. But I might be tanking later on in the evening. You never know. So, but we'll probably see you guys in a little bit as we do the tanking tonight. Thank you for being here. And we'll be back next week at the same time, right at 8-ish for the Mondays Matter. And we'll be continuing on with behavioral science. Luckily, I am through the molecular... no, I'm not. Molecular genetics. I'm only through the first one. Okay, so I have another. So I'm going to get through the... Okay, yeah, there's just 2 genetics. Okay, so I have another genetics to get through. And then recognizing relatives is the next one after that. Oh, there's another... Oh, no. There's actually 4 total. There's molecular genetics, and then there's behavioral genetics. So I'm going to try to just digest all the genetic stuff for next week. So we started with a lot of the DNA and genetics today, but apparently there's a whole lot more that I have to absorb. And I'm behind because I had studied some basic genetics because he was over my head when it started. So then, of course, I'm going to bring it, layman it down for you guys as best I can to make it just what we can digest. And this guy's good at that, and I'll take it another step further for you guys. Yeah, it looks like I got 3 more courses. They're an hour and 40 minutes each. So that's how long I spend, about 6 or 7 hours of study getting ready for these Monday Matters, but it's very interesting. So I'll try to give you guys a little bit more context of what I'll be talking about, so you might even prepare more questions that you might like. So many genetics information. It's ridiculous. Yeah, and then the next one after that is behavioral. A little bit more into the behavioral, and then we can get into stuff like sex. I mean, there's like, this goes into schizophrenia and sexuality. There's like all kinds of topics. So I know that while this biological science includes everything, there's no prerequisite for the course. And so there's no prerequisite for the topics of conversation. So every Monday, bring it. Mondays matter. We will make it count. We'll see you later on and later in the week.